Hi, this is Rich Ustowski, and I'm here today, April 8th, 2015, with Connie Gregory as part of the Center for Middletown Studies High School Consolidation Oral History Project. And Connie was nice enough to sit down today, and she said she would talk about her thoughts and opinions on the consolidation. So thank you, Connie.
You're welcome.
If you wouldn't mind starting us off by telling us a little bit about yourself. So where do you live? How old are you, and what do you do?
I'm 68. I live now at 4501 North Wheeling in Halterman Villas. I just moved here in August from the south side of town. I spent most of my adult life on the south side of town, still own a property there, which I'm trying to sell. Grew up just a block from where I've spent the last 20 years. And I consider myself a South Sider and probably always will.
Okay.
I graduated from Southside in 1964.
Okay, so as a South Sider, it seems like you identify
I do.
with the South Side of town.
I do.
What are your thoughts and opinions on the consolidation?
I know that it was a difficult decision for the school board, but it was essential. We've lost so much tax revenue, and the population has declined drastically in the decades since I was in high school, and it was a decision that had to be made. I do commend the school board for the manner in which they went about the transition, because when Northside High School closed, there was no transition. It was just, over. And I do appreciate the lengths they went to involve the student leaders, community leaders, the parents especially, because I think it's hardest on the parents.
Okay, so you mentioned the closing of Northside. Why do you think those two closings were different in respect to the way they handled it? Such as having town hall meetings for the South Side closing rather than when they really didn't, if I'm correct there.
Well, they anticipated that the Southsiders would have a big problem with it because traditionally it seems that anybody that lives on the south side of the railroad tracks feels that they get the short end of the stick when anything happens, when any decisions are made. And there has been a long time rivalry, well, since Southside opened, obviously, 50 years of rivalry between those two schools. Mm-hmm. Whereas Northside, I don't think it was that big a deal. They hadn't been open very long. That tradition wasn't ingrained as much as it was between Southside and Central.
So they were anticipating some tension?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And they should have. I mean, again, I think it was, the parents, especially those families that had had generations that had attended Southside, had a big problem with it because, I know they had the town meetings and they felt like they had some input, but I think those people that were most vocal felt that the decision had already been made and that the town meetings were a token offering, but.
Do you feel that way? Because I've heard other people say that too, but do you?
Well, I think they had to make that. I don't think they had any choice. I reviewed the various options for trying to meet budget requirements and so forth, and I don't think there was any option available to them that would have been anything other than, closing one of the high schools. And it was going to be Central that stayed open because of the longer history. Mm-hmm. And I will say that I was a bit annoyed by. The only time I think that it really bothered me was when someone that was actually in my class when we were at Central had sort of a smug attitude about the fact that Central's the one that's going to stay open because it has the longer history. And while that may be true, I just felt it was, it made us feel like we got the short end of the stick again. Yeah. And Southsiders gave up everything There was a little bit of talk for a while about maybe renaming it Muncie High School instead of Muncie Central, and maybe changing the colors or something. And
Changing the mascot.
yeah. And for a while I thought, okay, that seems fair. But then, in reality, they would have to give up all of those state championships, and that was not going to happen. The basketball championships, those things go away. If you change your school name, then that history is no longer yours. So I knew that wasn't going to happen, but I didn't appreciate the smugness of the person I talked to about that.
Well, maybe we could get some of your background before I keep asking you the formal questions I had. I know before we got on camera, you said you had your freshman and sophomore years of high school were at Central.
No, actually, those were in the days when we had junior high, which was 7th, 8th, and 7th, 8th, and 9th grades, and then we went to high school 10th, 11th, and 12th. And the classes of 63 and 64 started at Central. Obviously, there was no other high school. Mm-hmm. And those of us who lived on the south side of Muncie had the option then for the school year when Southside opened, we were able to choose whether we wanted to stay at Central, and most of the kids did, or go to Southside. And my friends and we had a lot of discussion with parents and so forth, and we decided we wanted to go to a new school. And there were lots of exciting opportunities to be in the first class that started all of those clubs and things that you get involved with in student life. And there were more opportunities for especially the boys. There were not girl sports in those days, but the boys had more opportunities to participate in varsity sports. And it's not all about sports, although basketball was a big deal in Muncie.
Yes.
There were other opportunities that we saw that we thought would be fun, and so we decided to go there. And it really was hardest on the parents because many of us had had season tickets to Bearcat games all of our lives, and the parents were you're what? You're going to Southside? You're going to switch loyalties? But for those of us that went to Southside, we loved it. We had a great time, I never regretted the decision to go there. I was fortunate to be a cheerleader at Central, and that was another reason my mother just couldn't comprehend that I wanted to go to another school, because it was really quite an honor at the time to be a cheerleader at Central, and it was fun, but it was a lot of fun at Southside. So
how did it work developing that new Southside identity? And you were saying, it was going to be fun to start everything fresh at Southside. How did that work?
Well, actually, the students were given the opportunity to pick the school colors and the mascot name and all of those things. And I don't know exactly what part that student input held. Because I think ultimately the decision was the school administrators, but I'm not sure Rebels would have been the best name. And in retrospect, at the time, we had no idea. We didn't have a clue about what that might cause later with race relations and so forth. And I'm embarrassed to say it didn't even. Wasn't even on my radar at the time, and it sounded like it made a lot of sense. The South and Rebels, and wouldn't that be cool? And so that's what we went with. And I sort of regret that now, but at the time it seemed like the best choice. And we did have that input. And because so many times the participation was maybe limited in the extracurricular activities and the clubs and so forth, that it seemed that we had more opportunities by going to Southside. Those kids that didn't really get to participate at Central had more opportunities at Southside.
Do you think a Southside identity within the high school formed quickly?
Yes, but I will say that at ball games, especially basketball, and really the only thing that mattered at the time, I think, was it was almost fanatical at Central. This huge history and all those state championships and the rivalries with communities all over East Central Indiana, and we of course didn't have that when we went to Southside. We were all for our team and all that, but you didn't have that fanaticism. There was a lot of energy there, but it wasn't. It was not what it was at Central.
Sure. So, do you feel like, going back to the formal questions here, do you feel like your voice was heard in the consolidation decision-making process?
Sure, I had several opportunities to attend the town meetings. I wrote a letter to the editor, and basically I was glad I was not on the school board because it's a horrible decision to have to make, but I think they went about it in the proper way, the only way they could. And I'm sure there are probably parents who felt they still did not have a voice because they felt it was already a done deal. But maybe it was. I know they did truly consider various options for keeping, maybe both high schools and bringing the middle school kids in, or making different configurations of those two high schools. But I really think it appears to have been the right decision. I haven't heard a lot of controversy. I think it was smooth, and that's mainly because the kids are resilient. They probably knew each other anyway around town, and so just coming together was probably not the big deal. I think it probably helped that they won the state band championships right away, and of course I feel that a lot of that was Southside kids, and that made that happen. But I think
Southside pride's coming out right
yes. But I think probably that helped a lot in solidifying that loyalty to Central, and I think in a couple years we'll look back and say, yeah, that was it was a big deal at the time, but yeah, whatever. Well, the other thing is that I will have to clarify that or qualify my comments, because I did not have children and grandchildren and whatever that went to Southside. When I graduated, I kind of moved on. And many of my classmates, we were coincidentally planning our 50th class reunion at the time that all this was going on. So we had some opportunities to talk about it. And I think most of us felt pretty much the same way I do. Isn't that sad that they're going to close that and kind of Southside will kind of drift away into history? But most of us hadn't been back in that school in 50 years. Except for I have been there for community meetings, and I took a tour, and we scheduled a tour for our classmates that came back for the reunion, but other than that, I kind of, it was part of my history, my memories. That's why I didn't have a really strong feeling about them closing it. I mean, it was sad, and gee, what happened to all those trophies, and but in the long run, it didn't impact my life, and that's basically what my letter to the editor said. It really doesn't directly impact my life and my current life. So, but that's not the case with people who had generations of family members that went there, and it was tougher on them. I realize that.
So, on that, why do you think that folks from the Central Alumni Association stepped up and talked at the town hall meetings, and I don't think there were any
Southside.
Southside alums. Well, there is no Southside Alumni Association.
No.
Maybe we should start with that. There isn't, is there?
No, and I don't know why that is. I don't even think any of my class members who that I see on a regular basis with the reunion planning and so forth. None of us had ever gone to. They have an alumni. Oh no, they call it an all-school dinner, alumni dinner kind of thing. None of us have ever gone. I don't know why that is. My sister is involved with the Central alumni, and they had the wonderful memorabilia room at the field house.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's awesome. I even donated some of my cheerleader stuff, my scrapbook, and a bunch of stuff that I had from my Central days, and I don't even know that there's ever been a conversation about Southside Alumni Association. I don't know why that is. I guess it takes a champion. as with any issue or anything, it takes someone to take it on and see if anybody's interested, and I'm not that person. So I don't know. I would probably be interested if someone else took it on, but.
Okay. So we touched on this at the beginning, but do you feel like you speak for or with a certain neighborhood or side of town?
I think I think my views at least are typical of the people in my class, or at least the ones that I know, and one of the best things about planning a reunion is just meeting monthly or more often with classmates that you don't maybe often see around town.
Sure.
And I think because we discussed it quite a bit, I really think most of us feel pretty well the views that I am expressing, but other generations, I don't know how the younger people feel. I really don't know.
So you say you identify more with a certain generation
Right.
that has gone through the Muncie schools rather than maybe a geographical side of town.
Well, no, I will always be a Southsider. I will strongly identify with Southside regardless of where I move, and that's, I think there is maybe a different mindset. I don't know, and I think the sentiment "once a rebel, always a rebel" is pretty much says it all for the people that grew up on the south side of town or spent any much time there. It's because we've felt. I shouldn't generalize because there are probably people that don't believe the same way I do, but I think there's a pretty strong sentiment that that we don't always get, a fair shake, and that it's always seemed. Oh, as a matter of fact, one time when I wrote a letter to the editor, I had lost my hubcap, and I was trying to. I was complaining about the potholes actually, but someone from Ball State called me a student.
Everyone's gonna complain.
I know. But a student from Ball State called and said, "Well, I know where you can find some, but it's on the south side of town. You might not want to go over there." And I said,
"That's what the student said."
Yeah, that's what the student said. There was a perception that the south side was bad. That I would be in danger if I went there. And I gently explained to her that's where I live, dear, and it's fine. But
yeah.
But there is a perception that it's the bad side of town.
Do you think that identity, identifying as a Southsider, played a role in how you approach the consolidation?
Oh, definitely. But I guess I feel more attuned to the school board because most of my adult life, I administered government budgets, and I know that when the revenue, in any organization, if the revenue's not there, you have to make drastic decisions, and regardless of what the sentiment is that will result, you have to make those decisions. And I guess that's probably my overriding feeling that they really didn't have any choice, and it's not over yet. They're going to have to close some elementary schools, and it's still going to be painful for a while to come. So, but I do think that I really do feel bad for the families of the kids that were going to Southside at the time, because I do think they probably felt they gave up everything, and they did.
Okay, so let's go a little deeper on the north side, south side divisions we've been talking about. Which it's safe to say they've been around in Muncie for a very long time, even dating back to when the Lynns wrote their Middletown book in the 20s.
And the videos of the, when was it, in the 70s? That video series that... Watch the one about the high schools. That was a real eye-opener.
You want to speak?
Oh, no, not, well... It wasn't. It was more of the sentiment from the one that sticks in my mind, and it was the sentiment of some of the Burris students at the time that were talking about the little $40,000 houses, and I thought, that was felt like and even in high school, the people that had gone to the north side schools looked down their noses at Southsiders and
So you felt that way as a high school student?
yes, but I ignored it. It didn't bother me that much. I mean, I just didn't associate with people that acted that way.
Okay.
And that was a fun thing, though, about, I will say that having all of those junior high schools feeding into Central, that was really fun because you got to meet all kinds of new kids, you know, and that was, one of the difficult parts about choosing to go to Southside, because we had to basically kind of not give up the friendships, but you wouldn't see those kids every day, and that was one of the harder parts because some of my really closest friends had to stay at Central, so it was a little bit difficult. But
now, some of the speakers at the town hall meetings, they expressed, maybe we could say almost a fear about what would happen when Southside kids would go to Central, and they talked about there might be bullying, there might be tension, there might be fights. Where do you think that fear came from? Did it come from this history of tension that you're talking about?
I don't think so. That seemed, I was shocked by that, frankly. And I certainly hope that the school administrators would have a handle on that, and that no kids would be bullied, and that they would be aware of bullying. And I think they probably do have they're more in tune to that now, with all these anti-bullying initiatives. But that really shocked me. And I guess I didn't pursue it, but I would hate to think that was, very widespread. Although, I don't know, I think there will always be a little bit of that feeling that certain neighborhoods in town are below standard. I mean, and I don't believe that at all. It's a generalization, and I work with people who are living in poverty, and there are all kinds of stigma attached to that, to lower income.
Sure.
But I would hate to think that that's very widespread.
Okay. What role do you think a high school plays in a community's identity?
It's huge. Particularly for economic development, for people wanting to live here. I think it's one of the first things that people look at. Businesses look at that. They look at graduation rates, and I worried about the headlines. And I still do. Because especially big businesses, when they're considering a municipality to settle in, the school system is going to be one of the first things they look at. And there's all this turmoil, and they don't want to take their kids and inject them into that kind of situation, into that kind of environment. So I think the better we handle things, and I think I really commend the school board or the city administration, or the community school administration, for the way they handled the transition. I think they did a marvelous job, and especially involving the community leaders and the students and the parents. That was key in making that transition. And I think if they continue to be thoughtful about how they proceed, then they'll have to make the hard decisions and just have to pull together. I like the thought of one Muncie, and if we can continue that and make sure that there are opportunities for everybody to be involved, even if they're against it, it's important to let those people have a voice and be involved in the process.
I want to take advantage of the fact that you're someone who has been able to see Muncie go from one high school to two high schools to three high schools, back to 2 to 1.
Yeah.
What does that trajectory say about the city of Muncie's development over time?
Well, I think it's very typical of the industrial communities that lost so much population, lost the manufacturing, and the population left to follow jobs, and I think it's very typical of the manufacturing communities. I don't think it's anything surprising. And I just think we need to continue to deal with it in a thoughtful manner.
So you would say that the consolidation is part of the bigger economic
Yes, it is.
changes that Muncie's going
Correct.
through?
Hmm.
Okay.
And it's going to continue.
Okay. Do we continue in the same direction as in people moving out, jobs
Well, no,
moving out?
I hope we've stabilized a bit. I think now we're, the community is working to, especially with the Muncie Action Plan initiatives and so forth, trying to attract, working on quality of place, trying to do all of the things that make a community attractive to people, and trying to keep our young people, not just bring other people here, but retiring people, bring the older people back. It's a great place to retire, and it's a great place for younger people to stay and work. So it's all about creating those job opportunities and the live-work situations, trying to assist young entrepreneurs, and I think those kinds of efforts are what's going to strengthen the city. And I don't see populations, large groups of people moving to Muncie, but if we can keep what we have and strengthen the communities and make it a great place to live, work, and play, then all for the better.
Well said. It's like with Ball State. How do we keep? I mean, there's 20,000 students at Ball State.
Yeah.
How do we keep some of them after they graduate?
Exactly.
Sticking here and working and living here.
Well, part of the Muncie Action Plan, several years ago when we were doing the community input, it was really interesting we involved the high school kids, and it was interesting to see that so many of them felt hopeless.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, about the future of Muncie and whether they would stay here, and it was very it was an eye opener, because it was true that we hadn't really done a lot to inspire hope to stay here and have a job, and I think that's one of the a strong impetus for keeping those Muncie Action Plan initiatives rolling, and involving the community every year to take another look at those and see where we can continue in the By Five initiative, especially starting with the very young people before they even get to school. That's really where economic development is going to take a good hit, because you have to prepare kids. It's a long-term thing, and we realize that it's going to take a long time, but I think Muncie has a good future.
So that kind of gets to my one of my questions here, and that is, what advice would you give to children growing up in Muncie today who are living in the city as it is now, and going through the school system, or will be in the case of the youngsters going through the school system as it's changing?
Well, I think if we can keep a positive attitude about one Muncie, no matter where you live, we're all working to make a better community. Stay in school. Get involved in the community outside your door. Help other people. Get involved in your community, and look beyond yourself. I don't know.
No, that's good. So at different points, you've talked about some of the effects of consolidation a little bit, but could you go into more detail on what you think they've been so far, and then how you see the effects playing out in the future?
The effects of the consolidation?
Yeah.
Well, I have to admit that I'm not involved in school activities, particularly, and most of what I know about it I read in the paper, which is not always the best source or the most current information. But I don't think we'll see much effect in terms of any disadvantages or sentiment against the consolidation. I think that's going to go away. You know, it's all about the kids, and parents who are supportive of their kids are going to roll with the punches. And the only time might be, well, even, you know, the difference in going from 1 to 2 schools was the divided loyalties, you know, and you get a basketball game with Central and Southside, and then, oh my gosh, what do we do? And the parents are struggling, and, you know, and you have sibling rivalries and maybe at different schools. But now that we're all one, you know, I don't see any, you know, any long-lasting problems with the consolidation. I think it's you know, it's a positive thing now, maybe.
Okay.
And we have participants from all over, all parts of the city working for the same goal, and that's to make the schools better. And you know, and I think that has to be where the future is. That we make a point to involve everybody from all parts of the city, and the leadership in the school needs to, you know, come from all parts of the city.
Now, I remember you saying that when Southside was originally instituted, that everyone thought it was a good thing that there would be more groups, more teams, which equated to more participation. Do you see the reverse being true now with the consolidation, that there's going to be less of those extracurricular opportunities?
Yes, and one of the questions that spoke to one of the questions at one of the town hall meetings, the one that I went to on the south side, well, it was at Southside High School, and the answer was that, particularly in terms of sports, you're limiting the number of kids who will participate in varsity sports, and the answer was, well, we'll just let them, they'll participate in extracurricular sports. Well, that's not the same thing, you know. Yeah. But I would hope that they would. I don't know that much about the extracurricular activities of the schools, but I would hope that they would do as much as possible to see that everybody who wants to participate in those kinds of activities, and again, it's not all about sports. The academic opportunities should also, like National Honor Society and those kinds of things, should also be open to anybody that's available. But that means, you know, you have to have the school sponsors and the you know, teachers to assist with that. So I don't know.
Well, let's end it on this. Let's end it with you getting to add anything you want to. Anything that we haven't talked about, or something that we did and you want to speak more to.
I think I got to say just about everything I wanted to. I think that's pretty much it.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Connie.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.